The National Assembly of South Korea conducted a simulation that showed extremely strange results. The simulation indicates that South Korea's current population of 51.7 million will decrease to just 20 million by the end of this century. The country's second largest city, Busan, is projected to become completely extinct by 2413, followed by Seoul about a century later. By 2750, the entire population of South Korea is expected to disappear. So, what is happening in South Korea to produce such alarming results? Currently, fertility rates in South Korea, which is the number of children each woman will have over her lifetime, are decreasing strangely. In 2024, South Korea reached the lowest fertility rate in the world, and it is believed to be the lowest fertility rate in history. Here, it is essential to understand a crucial point. For any country to maintain its stability, the fertility rate needs to be around 2.1 children per woman. If this rate falls, the population will start to decrease significantly year after year. In South Korea, the fertility rate first dropped below 2.1 about 40 years ago. At first, this wasn't alarming because many countries experience fluctuations in fertility rates that eventually stabilize. However, South Korea's fertility rate continued to decline year after year, reaching 1.2 children per woman in 2013, a figure lower than any organization studying the case had predicted. The rate did not stop there. By 2019, it had fallen to 0.9, making South Korea the first country in history to record a fertility rate of less than 1 child per woman. This means that out of every 10 women, 9 will have 1 child and 1 will have none. At the time this episode is being recorded, the fertility rate has reached 0.68, meaning that every 200 young people of reproductive age, 100 men and 100 women will have only 68 children, and these 68 will have about 23 children. This means that the generation that will come 3 generations from now will be only 4% of the current generation. To understand what is happening with fertility rates in South Korea, let's look at other places. In the United States in 1800, each woman had about 6 children. After 170 years in the 1970s, the rate reached 2.1. Keep in mind, we're talking about 170 years. In South Korea, the rate dropped from 6 children per woman to 0.8 per woman in just 60 years. Some projections indicate that by 2070, South Korea will lose about 30% of its total population, and by the end of the century, the number will be less than half of their current population. One of the most challenging aspects in Korea is that as the fertility rate continues to decrease, a significant portion of the population will be elderly over time. There will be fewer young people of working age who are supposed to support the economy, and this will inevitably lead to a severe economic and social collapse. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, capitalist societies have all been based on the idea that the state should have a large number of people of working age, ranging from 15 to 64 years old. These are the ones who work, support the country, and sustain both children and the elderly. This is because children and the elderly do not contribute to the economy in any way, but rather draw resources without offering anything in return. However, the situation was manageable as long as there was a large number of working-age people supporting the country. This was the case worldwide, especially from the early 1970s to the 1990s. During this period, the largest proportion of the population was of working age, which contributed to economic growth and significant development in industry, commerce, living standards, and income. But this situation won't last long, and the percentage of people working is starting to decrease significantly. In 2024, the number of working-age people in South Korea reached about 36.7 million, while the number of people of retirement age was about 9 million. This means that each retiree is supported by approximately 4 working-age people, which is a reasonable ratio. However, over time and under the current situation, the number of retirees will continue to increase while there are no new children being born, so the number of working-age people will start to decrease. Given that the average age of Koreans is higher than most other countries, reaching 45 years after being 37, this is among the highest rates in the world. It is also expected to reach 61 years by 2060, which has never happened before for a human society to have most of its population over 60 years old. Therefore, it is expected by 2070, more than half of South Korea's population will be of retirement age. And this will create a huge financial burden on younger people because a smaller number of young people will be required to support a larger number of retirees. Naturally, people of working age in these circumstances will decide not to have children to maintain a good quality of life, which will worsen the situation even further. One of the factors that have led to the fertility rate reaching the aforementioned number is that in the 1960s, South Korea was predominantly rural, with only 28% of the population living in cities. However, in just 40 years, South Korea transformed into one of the most modern and urbanized countries in the world, with 80% of the population now living in cities. But because the country is mountainous, the available land for construction is limited, making all cities crowded. People begin to feel that having fewer children would economically benefit the country and that their salaries would allow them to live better lives. Another factor that has reduced the birth rate is that most women in South Korea have entered the workforce with determination, working up to 1,900 hours annually, the highest among all developed countries. With social pressures and job competition, women begin to fear taking maternity leave as it would affect their promotion opportunities. Moreover, maternity leave impacts their income. Adding to this, there are no affordable daycare centers, mothers do not receive salaries during maternity leave, and there are no child-related leave policies, so women decided to work and not have children. Add to all these factors that the cost of living in South Korea is very high, especially housing prices. Raising children is also expensive. South Korea is the most expensive country in the world for child-rearing costs. For example, raising a child in South Korea costs 3 times more than raising a child in France and about 4 times more than raising a child in Australia. The main reason for this is the highly competitive nature of Korean society. In the 1960s, the state adopted an economic strategy to develop the country. What would they do? They supported some giant companies, most notably Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and Kia. This support included lower taxes, open loans, and many other privileges, which quickly allowed them to monopolize the local market, and now they can compete globally with ease. But what does this have to do with raising a child? For the government to properly support these companies, they had to establish high-level colleges to graduate students who could work in these companies instead of having to bring in expertise from outside Korea. Indeed, the government heavily supported education, and any student after graduation could work in any of these companies. This seems like an advantage, everything looks rosy. But the other side of the matter is that education expenses have become very high for parents, and they are in constant struggle to provide their children with the necessary private lessons and expensive schools so that the kids excel and win a job in one of these giant companies. Especially in South Korea, for your child to work in a prestigious company like the ones we mentioned, they need to graduate from one of the top universities, which are called SKY universities, consisting of Seoul National University, Korea University, and Yonsei University. No one enters these universities unless they score 101%, and they accept a limited number of students as well. Moreover, the number of available jobs in these giant companies is certainly limited, which increases the competition to a suffocating level for any family with a child, making Koreans feel that they spend their entire lives studying and working shifts only to live a very modest life in the end. As a result, marriage rates in Korea have significantly declined, and a country as large and powerful as South Korea is literally facing the threat of extinction. Finally, the question remains, are there no solutions? Of course, there are several solutions the government can implement to control the situation. These include improving working conditions and hours to allow more flexibility so that people can balance their work and personal lives. Secondly, the state can provide greater support to families with children, such as monthly allowances, tax reductions, anything to ease their financial burdens. Thirdly, the state can offer affordable housing for new families, making it easier for them to get married. Another thing the state can do is reduce the cost of education, thus relieving families of a significant burden and worry. Paid maternity leave would change the equation by 180 degrees. The mother would then take maternity leave normally without fearing job loss or any repercussions at work. Finally, the government needs to consider opening the door to immigration, welcoming labor from outside Korea, which would increase the population and alleviate the pressure on Korean youth.